Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're firing up the time machine. We're going to open a digital time capsule and take a look at the world of desktop computers through a guide from late 2013. Our source is a fascinating deep dive into what it called the Other Linux Desktop, KDE.
All right, let's dive right in. Now, to really get what this guide is all about, we have to kind of transport ourselves back in time. Think about the tech world over a decade ago. It was a really weird time of huge and honestly pretty controversial changes in how we interacted with our computers. And, the source material itself frames this perfectly. It calls this guide a snapshot, and that's exactly what it is. It was written for people who were fed up and looking for a real alternative, a different, more powerful way to get things done. To really understand why this guide even existed, you have to remember 2013. A lot of people were not happy. Windows 8 had just landed with its tile-based interface, and, well, that didn't go over so well with a lot of longtime users. And in the Linux world, Ubuntu's new Unity desktop was also stirring up a lot of debate. This whole situation created this perfect opening for something like KDE to say, hey, over here, remember what it's like to be in control.
So what was KDE according to this guide? Well, as it turns out, it was a lot more than just a pretty background and some icons on a screen. The first thing the guide makes clear is that the proper term isn't really KDE, it's the KDE software collection. And this project goes way back to 1996. The whole idea from the very beginning was to create a complete, consistent graphical world where every single app, from the file manager to the text editor, looked and felt like it belonged. And to show you where KDE fits into the puzzle, the guide broke down a Linux system into these layers. You've got the kernel at the very bottom, talking directly to the hardware. Then you build up with layers that draw things on the screen, manage the windows, and then right at the very top, sitting on everything and pulling it all together, that's where you find the desktop environment. That's KDE.
Okay, now we get to the main event. The thing that KDE was absolutely famous for, even back then. We're talking about its incredible, almost ridiculous level of user control. This was its superpower.
And when I say control, I mean you could tweak almost everything. The guide just lists example after example. You don't like the main panel at the bottom? Put it on the top or the side. Make it bigger, smaller, or make it disappear until you need it. You could change the look of the window borders, the buttons, you name it. And you could plaster your desktop with these little interactive things called widgets. But just changing how things look, that was only scratching the surface. The guide then introduces this concept that went way, way beyond that, pitching it as this revolutionary way to organize your entire digital life. And this is where we meet activities. The guide literally calls them virtual desktops on steroids. And that's the perfect way to put it. See, a normal virtual desktop just gives you a clean slate for different windows. But an activity, that was a whole different environment. You could have a totally unique background, a different set of widgets, and even specific apps tied just to that task. So you could have a work activity for your documents and a fun one for browsing, and they'd be completely separate worlds. So a super customizable desktop is one thing, but what do you actually do in it? The apps are what really matter. So let's take a look at the specific tools that this guide held up as prime examples of this powerful integrated ecosystem. First up on our tour is Dolphin, KDE's file manager. Now, on the surface, it looks pretty normal, right? But the guide points out this one piece of underlying tech that it calls a killer feature. To really get why this was such a big deal, you have to think back. Imagine it's 2013, and you need to edit a file that's on a remote server, like an FTP server. What's the process? What do you actually have to do? Well, usually it was this clumsy dance, right? You'd have to fire up some separate FTP program, download the file, then go hunt for it in your downloads folder, open it, edit it, save your changes, and then, and this is the part everyone forgets, you have to remember to re-upload it. It was slow, clunky, and just begging for you to make a mistake. But with KDE's Dolphin, you just skipped all that. Thanks to this amazing bit of tech called KIO slaves, you could browse that remote server right there in the file manager. You'd see the file, you double-click it, and it would just open, like it was right there on your computer. You hit save, and it saves right back to the server. No downloading, no re-uploading, it was seamless, a total game changer. Next up, the guide highlights Kate, the text editor. Now, it had all the fancy stuff you'd expect, like syntax highlighting to make code pretty. But its real killer feature was sessions. It could remember your entire workspace, every single file you had open, right where you left off, and bring it all back later with one click. For anyone juggling big projects, this was a massive time saver. Okay, so what about email, calendars, contacts, the whole shebang? For that, the guide presents Contact. And this wasn't just an email app. It was this all-in-one suite that pulled your email, your calendar, your to-do lists, everything, into one powerful integrated window. It was positioned as a seriously powerful, free software alternative to something like Microsoft Outlook. And the list just goes on, which really shows you the depth of this ecosystem. The guide points to tools like GwenView for super fast image edits with keyboard shortcuts, a system settings panel that let you control literally every single hotkey, and my personal favorite, Quake, a command line terminal that would drop down from the top of the screen with a single key press, just like the console in the video game Quake. So cool. So, we've taken this tour through the world of KDE as it was seen back in 2013. What's the big picture? When you step back, what was the core idea, the vision that was driving this whole project? When you boil it all down, the guide really paints a picture of a project with three core ideas baked into its DNA. First, just unmatched choice and customization. Your computer, your rules. Second, a huge focus on deep integration, making all the different apps work together like a well-oiled machine. And third, and this is maybe the most important, an absolutely unapologetic mission to empower the power user, the person who wants to fine-tune their workflow to perfection.
And all of this leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. In a tech world that has changed so much since 2013, a world that has leaned so heavily into simplicity and mobile-first design, how do these decade-old ideas hold up? How has a project built on this vision of ultimate control and integration managed to evolve, and how has it stayed true to that original mission? It's a fascinating thing to think about.